Thank you guys for doing this, and thank you for hosting. This seems like an incredible group. Everyone I've been talking to is having an awesome time, so just give it up for these guys putting this on. This is awesome. Okay, so let's start here. We'll just dive right into it. We don't have a ton of time. When I think about Zero Hash and Dynamic, these are companies that are not new to the conversation. You guys have been building, you've been leading, you've adopted and adapted and evolved, and you guys have been leading companies in crypto for many different seasons. And so what I'd like to start with for each of you is for those who are maybe entering this stablecoin conversation for the first time, I think it would undersell what you guys are bringing to the table as leaders and as companies to not touch on a little bit of the journey of where you've been quickly. What parts of this pre-stablecoin chapter have prepared you guys for this moment? What learnings, what specific things that you might have gone through in this pre-stablecoin season of the companies versus maybe a founder who's starting a company right now for the first time? Maybe, Itai, if you want to lead the way.
Yeah, I think for me, the key point, I think, where I realized the current payment infrastructure is broken was when, and therefore, over time needs to be fixed, I was at Zenefits, which was a big HR tech company, super fast growing. I ran their platform team, and one of the products that I was responsible for was contractor payments. And I was like, this is great. We can pay contractors internationally. This is awesome. And then, I started chatting with the engineering team. Okay, how does this actually work? And it turns out that at the end of every day, they would manually download like an Excel sheet from Zenefits and manually upload that to Silicon Valley Bank for ACH transactions and close their eyes and hope for the best. And I was like, there's no way this is the way this stuff happens. And it turns out it does. Right? It turns out the way you pay contractors internationally for a very long time was you literally would download an Excel sheet with transactions and you would upload it and hope that SVB accepts that and kind of processes that. And then you close your eyes and you hope that in 2 days the money shows up elsewhere. Sometimes it's 4 days because there are 2 hops. And that seemed insane to me. Right, and then full circle, Yoni, my co-founder, and I actually started talking about crypto probably in like 2011, 2012. But full circle, when we started Dynamic in 2021 and 2022, it became extremely clear to us that this is the way in which money should move, right? And so it was kind of these 2 points of, hey, this thing in 2015, 2016, from like the hottest tech startup out there, is fully broken, and here's a solution that's extremely elegant and extremely global. That for us was what kind of put 2 and 2 together as to, okay, this is clearly the way this will work going forward. It might take 5 years, might take 7, might take 10, doesn't matter. It is clearly the way in which we will globally move money over the next 10 years. I do not see a scenario based on these experiences in which it is not a primary method in which we do global money movement. So that's really how we thought or how we got to this conclusion.
Awesome. Yeah, I suppose it's passion, right? So trying to solve a real problem. The space is shiny right now. I can guarantee you it will become less shiny at some point. And then it will become even shinier. That is how any technological evolution happens. Right? And so, to your question, I think one of the challenges of building this space, and we've been building this space in stablecoins and crypto since 2017, is that there are these natural inflection points. And so, although this is a stablecoin industry, there will be different applications. I mean, you're starting to see, for example, the founder of Air Wallets pick some holes, and I think some valid holes, right? And so, I think we need to make sure that we're not acolytes to the technology. It's, to your point, it's actually acolytes about the problem that we're trying to solve. And balancing the hype with the fear of these different pieces, and when naturally this will be a cyclical space, and trying to narrow that emotional bound, and be, to your point, very focused on a time horizon that is long. In the long run, we are right? But at some point, we will be wrong, and there will be different failures, there'll be different experimentations. And so that's why I think excites me about both dynamic and zero hash, is that we can take multiple bets with our partners doing different things in different applications. So I think that's the challenge, but also equally the opportunity.
I got to ask, what holes were poked that you think were potentially valid? Because that guy's gotten a lot of heat for what he did. So I'm curious if what you mean when you say that.
I mean, the guy's a genius marketer as well, right? So hate is fine online. I think, again, I think stablecoins are absolutely revolutionary in a bunch of different ways. Does it solve every single problem across every single payment channel? No. Right? And so it really depends on the application and the use case. And I think that's what's key. So I think Jack's pulled out some elements, and I can almost guarantee you that they are looking at stablecoins, right? But I think he's picking some elements. I think if you look at a cross-border remittance use case, and Felix Pago is a great example of a group solving a real problem in a real channel where there's really great liquidity pools in places like Mexico and other places, and where there's a real need. But I think this argument that stablecoins in every single channel, every single use case, every type of remittance makes sense, I don't think holds true today. I think that the applications will increase, but that will actually be dependent on local liquidity pools expanding.
Any thoughts? I feel like you got some.
Yeah. No, I think, look,
I was told to make this spicy. Am I doing sort of spicy?
Perfect. This is perfect. I think to your point, like, first, genius marketer, the fact that we're spending, this is like the, here and in the previous sessions, we're spending time talking about air wallets, phenomenal. I am very jealous. But I think his point, which is right, is that he built a competitive system to stablecoins, right? And so in this world, in a lot of ways, it works without it, right? And so if Air Wallets, for instance, takes over globally and is the only used system and they can kind of balance everything on their end, yes, that is correct. You don't necessarily need stablecoins, but it's essentially, yes, if you have a direct competing, or like not direct, but there's a competing technology that you spent a lot of time and resources on, it makes sense that you're shying away from an alternative. I do think that he's correct that in like spaces in which there's very high frequency of money movement, we've gotten to very efficient markets, right? I think it's going to be very hard for stablecoin to be more efficient than euro versus dollars. I don't think there's potentially
and two-sided, right? So that the
Correct.
so that the netting does actually.
That's right. There's exactly, but I do think that the world's bigger than that. Right, and where I think all of us are seeing traction, and again, Felix Pago is a good example, is anywhere outside that, right? Where there's immediate value. There's also immediate value for stablecoins for US-based accounts. People in the US don't realize that people outside the US kind of want exposure to dollars, right? And those use cases, the use cases of global kind of treasury movement, are huge use cases that I think he does not necessarily even cover in his argument, right? He kind of siloed stablecoin to a very specific thing, and then he kind of picked that apart. But it's sort of like arguing against the internet, right? It's like there's many things in the internet. If you pick one thing, yes, you can argue against it, but there's so many use cases here.
Yep. Pivoting a little bit. So huge news recently with some, Stripe's recent acquisitions. I wanted to ask you about this directly, just as you think about the Privy acquisition, obviously massively close to the wallet space, the technology there. How are you feeling as a founder building this company? And as you think about that, is that validating for you? Does that fire you up? Personally, how does that feel?
I haven't heard of it. What is it? No, look, I think first, congrats to that team. They're a great team. We're really happy for them. I think that the bigger picture here is the following, which is, when we started Dynamic, our thesis was extremely, and I said this at the beginning, our thesis was extremely straightforward, which is, if you fundamentally believe that the way in which we move money globally and we do things is on-chain going forward, it's steady state in 10 years, and every app on your phone is going to have a crypto component, then you have to fundamentally believe that every app on your phone will have a wallet component, right? Because every crypto transaction starts with a wallet and ends with a wallet, right? And if you believe that thesis, then you have to believe there's going to be gigantic companies generational companies that allow kind of this wallet infrastructure at global scale, right? And with that fundamental belief, I kind of think about acquisitions in this space, like the Stripe acquisition, as extremely bullish signals that we're moving in the right space, right? There are giant wallet companies out there like Fireblocks, right? That's a giant wallet company, right? Their success did not imply anything besides kind of growing the pie for everyone else. And so, when I look at those and when I look at these signals of Web 2 companies coming in and doubling down on everything crypto, I become extremely bullish on the fact that we're accelerating and the fact that in our seed stage, we said 5 years and everyone gets a wallet. We're actually closer to that prediction. We're 3 years in. We have 2 more years to be right. I kind of think that this makes me extremely bullish that we're actually kind of heading in the right direction.
But just on that point, right, about how founders should think about this space, I think we're still really early, right? So those who've been in the space for long enough will remember that Curve got bought by PayPal. And you mentioned Fireblocks. Everyone was, wow, that's the end of Fireblocks. It was the best thing that happened to Fireblocks, by far, right? Curve got bought $300-400 million, and then 2 years later, Fireblocks is raising $8 billion, right? So just because there's big players in this space buying companies around you, there is still massive opportunity. And that's why I think we connected, Yoni, Itai, myself, and others. We're in this for the long run, right? And so if you're in it for the long run, payments is incredibly fragmented. Stripe is big, but there's many other payment groups. It's a very fragmented space. I don't know the exact market share, but in some markets it's very low single digits, in some it's higher single digits. So the other 90% of the market is going to be using something else, right? And so I think to your first point around what should founders look for and builders, don't be put off by this sense that there's big players in this space. And I think the Fireblocks Curve partnership should give people a lot of confidence. It acted as a great validator for the space. Fireblocks then went on to become a massively bigger, multiples bigger. It took out a competitor, right? So I think there's a lot to be excited about by those sorts of acquisitions. And it's a great validator for the space and a great opportunity.
It's amazing. Can you guys touch on the relationship you have just with Dynamic plus Zero Hash, specifically what that has unlocked for you, how you guys are thinking about building in the future?
Sure, I could maybe start. I met Edward yesterday. No, I'm kidding. Look, we've been. I think we've been working together for a while now, and the cool thing is, and the relationship is, to your point, it's very much a two-way relationship, right? Dynamic. What you realize very quickly is essentially you can kind of make it extremely easy for someone to spin up a wallet, which is where we kind of thrive, right? Like at the end of the day, what we do extremely well is the ability for you to show up somewhere and enter an email and get a wallet immediately or connect your existing wallet, right? And you do that and you solve a first real problem, which is, okay, reducing the friction for someone to get on chain without them even knowing. But then you realize very quickly that the second problem after that is getting something into their wallet or getting something out of their wallet, right? And that's where this relationship is powerful, because it means that we cannot exist without the ability to globally, in an extremely efficient scale, in a compliant manner, get money into a wallet or out of the wallet, which is what Zero Hash does incredibly well, right? And in massive scale, with a bunch of kind of additional features on top. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, vice versa is true, which is when you move money on chain or off chain, you got to move it to a wallet, right? Where Dynamic comes in, right? And so that's how we view that relationship. It's super symbiotic in that sense. Not to overuse lingo, but just because one kind of builds on top of the other, and to build, the next Venmo, the next global remittance app, the next treasury management app, the next payroll app, the next contractor payment app, you kind of need both of these solutions together.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I agree with everything Itai's saying. I think that when you look at, for example, payroll, I think I view that as part of a broader lens around, for example, any two-sided marketplace, right? And you've seen announcements from Meta and others. And so, the first bit that we do is effectively allow people to convert that, make that super seamless. And some people may have a wallet, right? But the second piece is a lot of people don't. And that's obviously where the partnership comes in. Secondly, I think equally, the next generationally defining business, whether that is on a global scale, whether that be the next Replit, whether that be the next Uber, whether that be the next creator platform, I think will be built on stablecoins, both from a wallet perspective and from a transactional basis. And so that's what excites me about the partnership, is it's that symbiotic nature to allow existing players in any two-sided marketplace to adjust the way and create more optionality in a really, really seamless, and I mentioned user experience friendly way. And then secondly is to enable builders that are creating businesses that span hundreds of countries to instantly access those geos and unlock that. And that's the opportunity.
What about each of those things? Because I agree, I'm seeing there's very clear swim lanes happening across the industry with the wallet side and the sort of on and off ramp in and outside. What about those two areas? I think for me, I'm always thinking about like where does defensibility come in for a business? What are the most, the things when you're building that are the real core defensible technologies that you're building? What about the wallet and what about the on and off ramping in your experience building it has made it feel defensible? What is so hard about it?
Yeah, I can start with the wallet side. Look, at the end of the day, the vast majority of developers globally don't really care, or should they care, about crypto, right? In the same way that no one wakes up in the morning and says, let me figure out the ins and outs of OAuth, and no one wakes up in the morning and says, okay, I really want to learn about the wonderful world of Swift and ACH. Right? They kind of want to implement something and move on their merry way and kind of do what they actually are trying to, or build what they're actually trying to build. That is doubly true in a vibe coding environment where your next set of startups are going to be built extremely quickly on top of existing tools, because then you can get to market extremely quickly, right? We are, in that sense, kind of a crypto abstraction company, right? Our goal is to abstract away as much complexity as possible for you to implement these magnificent global rails in your app, right? And it starts with wallets, and it brings on-ramps and off-ramps on top of it, and it brings swaps, and it brings identity, and it brings all that type of stuff. And the defensibility in a lot of ways is that kind of all-in-one stack, right, that abstracts away that complexity, but also the fact that you can implement this all-in-one stack in in 5 minutes and go on your merry way. And that's actually a non-trivial problem to solve, because you're taking a lot of that complexity that is today in front of the scene, is kind of in the forefront, and moving it behind the scenes for this kind of abstracted experience. It's the same reason why companies like Plaid exist, right? Where their entire hypothesis and defensibility is around the fact that no one wakes up in the morning and says, let me integrate with 50 or 100 bank accounts and pull all that data and do that at scale. Right, and the same that Stripe has in terms of like 5 lines of code, and you get access to global kind of ACH and credit card, et cetera. And so that's where we see our defensibility. We really think about Dynamic as kind of an abstraction company, or a crypto abstraction company, where our goal is to make it extremely simple for you to tap into these global rails and not think about any of the complexity behind the scenes.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, where Zero Hash is positioned, I think technical abstraction as well, right? What we do is complex at scale that we do it on across, 100 different assets. If you just look at stablecoins, the number of stablecoins and the velocity of movement in the space is incredibly fast. So, one data point I'm proud of is USDC.world was launched, I think, last week, and within 3 days we launched USDC.world, right? So there's this complexity and continuous evolution that exists, and that for us being at the cutting edge of of that technological revolution and providing our customers with as much breadth of choice is really critical. Secondly, I would say it's trust, right? The next wave of adopters in this space will be the largest banks in the world. They'll be the largest merchants in the world. And what they're looking for is trust, right? The way that these decisions are made at these organizations is a CYA risk approach. Everything's viewed in the framework of risk. Everything. So the reason why players are entering this space in stables isn't because they truly believe in the technology, it's because the risk curve has shifted. It's now more risky not to be involved than to be involved. But in order to make the decisions and the partner decisions that they make, it's largely around that. And so for us, having been building since 2017, I think a pretty incredible track record with partners ranging from, BlackRock, Shift4, Nuve, Felix Pago, a range of interactive brokers. These are publicly traded massive organizations with a lot to lose. I think having done that for the last 8 years and continuing to do so is a huge competitive advantage that we lean into.
100%. How do you specifically, when I think about Zero Hash, I've always thought about just the regulatory strength and history that you guys have. What are your current feelings right now, Edward, around Genius, how that's progressing? Is that competitively really exciting for you guys? Does that feel like, hey, maybe some of this moat is, if you're able to be honest about that, or I'm candid, what you think about it?
Yeah.
You guys, candidly, they've crushed it. They've more licenses than most. You guys were first to the game there. I wanted to ask you how you're currently feeling about that.
Yeah, so look, I think within we view licensing as part of trust. It's one framework. You're abstracting away complexity. Getting a slap for unlicensed money transmission is a federal crime, right? And so that's one of the elements. But it's one part of the overarching trust. I think with regards to your specific question around Genius is largely focused around the issuer. And so if you're of a certain size, you're going to have to be a bank, right? So this concept that banks lose with the Genius Act is, the banks win, right? Circle is going to have to become a bank, right? So that's the reality of it. We're not an issuer, so it doesn't affect us in that sense. Where I do think it plays in is that I do believe many, many banks will issue stablecoins, and that's infrastructure that we provide. And then secondly, to my earlier comments, what it's going to do is it's going to drive a massive fragmentation in stablecoins. Massive, right? We've seen JPMMD, every bank is thinking about this. And so right now you have, probably 5 stablecoins that matter. Some would argue less, right? I think you're going
asset fragmentation, you mean?
Yeah, so
many of them?
USDC. So USDC, USDT, RLUSD, let's call those the big three. And then PYUSD are, but after the big 2, you kind of drop down. I think you're going to have 10 to 20 very, very large, meaningful stablecoin issuers created, right? And so what that does is it creates this increased technical complexity where Zero Hash is actually perfectly positioned, which is around interoperability. So if I want to send you a stablecoin and I've got JPMD and you've got USDT, it doesn't work, right? There's got to be an interoperability layer that exists. There's got to be interoperability cross-asset, and there's also got to be interoperability cross-chain. So even if I'm sending you USDT, if you're on USDC. Let's say they're launching on Lightning, and I'm on USDT.eth, again, these things don't compute. So the Genius bill is actually going to create, what it does incredibly well is that it's going to make this technology distributed everywhere. That's what's incredibly exciting. Everybody in the US is going to have access to a stablecoin instantly because all the banks are going to jump in. That's incredible. But the usability challenge is only going to become greater. And that's why I think companies like ours, which abstract away the complexity, only benefit significantly from Genius.
Incredible answer. All right, we got to wrap up here. So last question for you both. This is a room full of stablecoin builders, leaders, people who are trying to drive the space forward. What would be the thing that you would want to leave this room with? This is a serious, sector for you, beachhead market. What would be the call or invitation to this room if, when you're thinking about the kind of commercial relationships you're looking to form, the types of builders you're looking to support, what would be your invitation to them?
Come to our happy hours would be the invitation. No, I think. Look, I think we get excited. We Dynamic kind of get this really special spot in the world of crypto, which is when you start a company, one of the first things you need is wallet infrastructure, right? Because you can't build anything without it. Which means that we get to see a bunch of really creative use cases that have not existed before. Anywhere from kind of new neobanks to, again, global money movement to, I just saw a use case where you move money, but then you actually claim it as cash. in certain locations globally. Right? These are really cool use cases. And so my call, my ask is if you're thinking about this space, or if you're building in this space, we have a blast just brainstorming with folks these solutions, right? One of the cool things is we get to build alongside a lot of builders who come in with ideas that we could not build for because did not exist, right? And so I think our ask, and our call is talk to the dynamic team. If you're working on something, you're building something that's unique, tell us what you're building. We want to build tools for that, right? Again, we're a crypto abstraction company. Our goal is to remove these constraints so you can focus on the actual use case. And so that's pretty much our call to action, again, with the addition of come to the happy hours at 5. Those are really the two.
I think somewhat linked. I mean, I think for us, where we look to either invest in companies or what excites us is multi-year time horizons, right? If the problem's easy, it would have been solved. So if your time horizon has to be long, because the problem's got to be big enough, and I think that's the first point. I think to Itai's point, we like doing things for the first time as well. So when you look at, for example, our account funding product with stablecoins, we've been able to bring the first regulated clearinghouse, regulated by the CFTC, to enable stablecoins. That's Kalshi with Zero Hash. We've brought in the first regulated broker-dealer directly into stablecoins, which is Tasty Trade. And then we brought in the first regulated fund in the United States that is a tokenized fund, which is both Benji by Franklin Templeton. We've also brought in BlackRock, which is technically outside of the United States, but also we've brought in groups like Hamilton Lane with Republic. So we love bringing in the first players into the space and disrupting. Especially across a range of regulated areas, whether it be CFTC, SEC, FINRA, and really educating people about the benefits of stablecoins and how you can make this an incredible unlock for your clients.
Incredible. Thank you, guys. Let's give it up for them.
Thank you.